All right, we're back, and you can see the lovely quarantine hair growing because it's kind of the end of the world outside with a global pandemic, but we're still podcasting. We're still at it, still talking magic, and I have Jaime and Chino joining me. So welcome back, guys. We can talk more magic
Thanks.
together.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of like news related stuff. A new set came out. Things have gotten crazy in Magic because of the new set, because that's how it always is. I feel like last time we were talking, we are just like, man, Oko, so crazy. Have you seen this card? And now it's like banned and there's new cards and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about what's going on in kind of the state of Magic today. We're going to be talking about DCI numbers today. We're going to be talking about historic today. So we're going to be bouncing around to other formats because there's new things called companions that exist that have warped other formats, not just standard and stuff like that. So we're going to be doing lots of talking about some of these new cards because, there's a new set. It's time to do that kind of stuff. So before we dive into stuff about DCI numbers, I want to hear from you guys and let me know how your games have been going lately. What have you been playing? What's been going on in your kind of magic stuff recently?
All right, fair enough. Gino, you want to go first, or you want me to take it?
You can do best of one.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I first I'm gonna just touch on the whole companion thing. It really kind of feels like Oko was the Infinity Gauntlet, and that entire saga has finished. And now with companions coming out, it feels like everybody has a fucking Infinity Gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of what I've been feeling and watching companion decks pop up. But in terms of what I've been playing standard quite a bit actually on Arena. I've tried a couple of different decks. I've been messing around, primarily in best of ones. So I've been doing some Teamer. I've done Jeskai Wimoda. I say that wrong all
Winota.
the time.
Yeah, I say Winota.
Yeah, so that's been the deck that I've had the most success with. For some of you who haven't played the deck, it's essentially a combo based deck where this creature costs 4. It's a Boros creature, and when a non-human creature attacks, you're able to look at the top 5 or 6 cards. I think it's 6 cards of your deck.
It's top
You can
six, yep.
play, yeah, you can play a creature from those into the battlefield attack and tapped and attacking. And basically, what you do is you run a bunch of Agent of Treachery and steal all their shit before they even had a chance to play it. So, kind of a douchebag deck. I'm loving it. It's been the deck that I think I've had the most success against companion-based decks, as well as Teferi and Jeskai control-y decks, and that's pretty much why I've been playing it in Best of Ones, is because it has a decent matchup against aggro. I feel like I do fairly well against anything that has Teferi in it, and then it literally dumpsters. If I get the combo before they can get all their stuff online, I literally dumpsters on companions.
Yeah, I do want to make a quick note with it. So the way that it triggers is when you have a non-human attacking, and then it finds humans. It's a very
That's it.
weird
Sorry.
card in that regard of how you make it work. So you have to make sure that you have non-humans or a way to generate non-humans in your deck to trigger and cheat out those big humans, like you were talking about, and steal all their permanents and stuff like that. So just a little
Yeah, so
side
it
note.
runs the what is it? Prince Charming, the Scry, the Pyromancer to summon the elemental tokens, and then our good old Goblin Man to create Goblin tokens. So it has a lot of different avenues to create non-human creatures to be able to summon those human creatures. You're so sorry about that.
No, you're
That's
good. I
right. I
pulled the
forgot
card
what
up
I was
on
talking
on
about.
screen
Yeah,
too. If people are
no.
watching the video version or if you're listening to the podcast version, just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. So Jaime's been playing a lot of best of ones. Chino, what about you?
I've been focusing on best of three just to practice sideboarding because I've been that's my weak point that I've been
Mm-hmm.
trying to improve. But I've been playing a lot of Rakdos Sacrifice with the was it Obos? I can never pronounce that either. But
Yeah, Obosh.
Obosh, that's it. Um, but yeah, I've noticed a bunch of slow decks, I guess, in best of three
Mm-hmm.
now.
It's
A
very
lot
kind of
of
mid-rangey, control-y, slower stuff.
Yeah, lots and lots of counter magic,
Mm.
and board wipes. There was a couple decks I played against yesterday actually that, I think they played like one or two creatures ever, and the rest was just board wipes, counter spells, exiles, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Um, and I can't remember the planeswalker that it's, if a creature deals damage to you, you lose the game. So they just kept cheating that out from the
Wow.
graveyard, from their hand, back and forth, and then it just wear you down, sort of thing. So it seems like it's very opposite of what Best of One is.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So, 'cause as playing Rakdos Sacrifice, it's like it's not aggro-y, but it can be,
Mm-hmm.
and it really suffers from board wipes and exiles, permanent sort of stuff, or um, Agents of Treachery, because that's another thing that is fairly prevalent. So all your witches' ovens get taken, and you have no mechanism to sacrifice. So
Kind of shuts you
uh,
down quickly.
yeah, basically.
Mm.
So you have to sort of rely on creative ways to still sacrifice things, but it just feels bad. So I'm probably gonna look at changing decks. But
Well, there's a lot of decks. I mean, you can always go onto that Euron plan, just guy 80 card mirror matchup that the rest of the people are playing too, right?
yeah, that's true. I was looking at that, and the Bant Ramp, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that seems pretty cool or pretty fun as well. But I always like the red, black, blue sort of decks.
Yeah, those
So
Grixis colors.
yeah,
Um,
Teamer's really fun too, Chino. If you're looking for a best of three, rampy looking, rampy deck style. That's what I play for best of threes. I really like it.
mhm.
yeah. It definitely seems like I'm gonna pick something a little slower. I feel like just to sort of not get dumpstered every other game.
Yeah,
So
I think that's the safe bet for best of threes, right? Is to slow it down. If you want to play aggressive, then play the best of ones, maybe.
yeah, yeah. Because I haven't played against a single aggro deck like the mono reds or
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff ever since the new set came out. So it's all been slow, sort of wear you down over time decks.
It's because it requires brain power now. That some of
Yes.
the now
Yeah,
that the meta has changed, people can't just be like, "Oh, I have two creatures in play, you lose." Now it's like, "Oh God, if I play the wrong creature, I'm going to lose."
I mean, I will be honest. I did that once. I was able to curve out perfectly and get Obosh out on turn 4, and did I think like 12 or something damage in one turn in one. But that only happened once. So
Yeah, it's that magic Christmas land of everything lining up, right?
yep.
Yeah, I haven't played very much best of three. I did play a little bit of best of one when things first came out, and I was linking up some of the lists that I had played. It's like, okay, I'm trying out this, you know, Teamer Phoenix list for a little bit. I'm trying out the kind of Loris Sacrifice Aristocrat style deck. I'm trying out this Garuda deck and just sort of like combo. I was playing the cycling deck for a little bit and mainly playing best of ones, but it was all waiting to play historic. So
Yeah.
we could talk about historic though a little bit later, but I just want to let people know kind of where I'm at. I've also been just brewing still, messing with commander decks and messing with modern decks and things like that, but not being able to play as much in those formats. But that's
One
okay.
one last thing I'll say about the best of three is that the companions feel a lot weaker than the best of ones because there's so much removal in the best of three that you play your companion and the very next turn it's either, or that turn even, it's either killed, exiled, bounce back to your hand or whatever.
Yeah,
So um
a lot more answers.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the
definitely.
deck building is designed differently. I feel like in that.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
yep.
All right, so let's talk DCI numbers. So for those that are not familiar with what a DCI number is, it used to be this string of numbers that you got to be able to play Magic in offline events. So this could be your local game store, like F&M's, just pre-releases, things like that. Or if you went to larger events, like the SCG Opens, those side events, the GPs, Grand Prix, or the Magic Fest, as they're known now. If you would go to those events in order to play in the main event or in side events, even if it was just like an 8-person draft or something like that, you would have to have this number to go and play in these events. And Wizards has officially announced that they are getting rid of the Planeswalker points and getting rid of the DCI numbers. So if you have your DCI number and you want to look up your history with Magic and see how many Planeswalker points you have, what level you're at, because they had a whole leveling system that kind of talked about the way that worked, and it also talked about the history of your events, and there would be little badges that you can get, like if you were winning a bunch, you would get like this unstoppable thing, and it had a portrait of like Platinum Angel and little cool things like that. But if you want to see your history, do it now, because it's going away the end of May. It's kind of the too long didn't read version of it.
So I have a quick question. So the history part of it, so it's just it's what? It's being deleted. It's not being archived. I'm not too familiar with this change, and we talked a little bit about this beforehand. So I was just curious in terms of really what I guess my first thing is what's the reason behind the change, because that's just kind of how my brain works. And then the second would be, is any of that information going to be archived anywhere for anyone who's interested at looking at a player's history, or a player is interested in their own player history?
So those are really good questions. So the first one is DCI numbers are going to exist and can be used at the larger events like Grand Prix, Magic Fest until 2021. But otherwise, you're going to have to start using your Wizards account. So if you have MTG Arena, your Wizards account is your email that you have for MTG Arena. So they're basically just kind of merging it and going closer and closer to this kind of digital side of things and having everything all tied together instead of having separate accounts. They're like, you know what? If we're going to be holding more events that rely on Arena to play Standard and do things like that, why don't we just make them all be focused along that line? And yeah, I'm sure that's fine, except for the older formats. Whatever. Who cares? All right. Having a Wizards account is not a big deal. People can manage that. DCIs are going to exist for a little bit for bigger events. But the point-wise and the history is going away on May 27th. And it will no longer be available. There's not going to be an archive of it. So if you want that information, go through and at least take a screenshot of the stuff that you want, because there's no way to download that information either. There's not a link that lets you like press and download your whole history. You can just gotta pick and choose what you want to save or not save, and after that, it's gone.
So what you're saying is lying is just going to go through the roofs. I could be like, I've attended 10 Grand Prix. Well, no one would know any better.
So when this first popped up, the thing that most people were worried about is if someone's DCI number is suspended, right? Like if they were suspended for cheating or doing something, how is that going to, factor into things? So.
Oh my God! Is that basically everybody's getting a free slate? Because that seems so wrong on so many levels.
I think it won't be as much of an issue because there's still a whole process for people that have been suspended who have tried to get new DCI numbers, and they'll get found out and stuff like that. So I feel like it'll be doable and not as much of a concern, but it was just something that I know people were talking about initially. But
got it. Okay.
But yeah, you get your Wizards account. Be able to check out the Planeswalker points. I did look up, and the first event that I attended was in 2013, and it was February 2013. That was right around the gate crash time period. So like I had played before then, but that was the first event that I actually attended. So that was cool to be able to look back and see all that stuff. And then I got to at least look and see, okay, how'd I do at events and pre-releases and things like that. And I was really bad in the first couple of years, but it was cool to see, like, all right, I started competing at
still
events
bad.
in 2013. Yeah, you're right. It's like,
At least it got better for you, man.
yeah.
I'm still in the same spot.
Well, it was cool because like I got to see the progress, right, by looking at this history, and it was like, all right, cool. I'm going like 1 and 3 at like trips or something like that at our local game shop, and then as it's building up, it's like, okay, oh, and 2015 hits, and now I'm getting 10th place at classics, and now I'm winning the qualifier event for GP Pittsburgh to get 2 buys in that event, and then I make day 2 at that GP, and I skyrocket up in 2015 of just like grinding and get to see that. But it's like, well, after this, it's all going away, right? So I screenshot that stuff because that was meaningful and important to me. And then the rest of it, it's like, all right, well, I guess it sucks that I'm going to lose this and it's going to be gone. But I guess that's how it works with Wizards not wanting to keep everything. So, all right, so let's talk about what is going on with power level of cards. I think we talked about it in the last episode anyway, and it seems to be a continual discussion that has been taking place just with the amount of cards that keep getting banned. But Mark Rosewater, who most people are familiar with, is kind of the main brain behind Magic the Gathering, and he put out a message on Twitter recently and just wanting people to answer a simple poll of 2 questions of, while R&D focuses on supporting innovation and balance, if there were having to be a prioritization of one or the other, which would people prefer, innovation or balance? So what do you guys think about this question, first of all? Like, Chino, what's your thoughts when you hear that innovation versus balance kind of discussion initially?
My first reaction was that there's only one real answer to this one, but no, it's definitely it's in my opinion, balance is much more important, because if it's innovative but only a handful of decks work, then it's just boring because everyone's playing the exact same thing, and it's good to be innovative just to keep things fresh, but I feel like balance is much more important. So, because then like you said, you get Oko, which I mean, every deck splashed blue or green to be able to cast him. So,
and it broke every format.
Exactly. Yeah. So, which I mean, yeah, it's fun to have a new Planeswalker to play with, but when it's super powerful, I don't know. I just think that it's not worth it.
Makes sense. Jaime, what about you? Same sort of take, or are you feeling a little differently?
So I'm a little bit different, but also kind of in that lane. I think personally balance is a little bit more important, but I think it's such a hard game, right? Because you want the format to be balanced so that there's enough, so that it doesn't feel like one particular deck wins or that a particular game mechanic is overtaking everything. But at the same time, if there isn't any innovation or any creativity, then the format just kind of stays the same. And then when a new set comes out, all you're getting are a couple new cards that just fit into that particular deck, and or whatever decks are running as the primary decks, and then nothing new happens. It doesn't change. The meta kind of stays the same. So I think balance is very important, but it's almost just as important as the innovation part of it, because again, you get a stagnant meta that just kind of feels the same. All the decks are not really changing, and kind of what our topic was last time when we were talking about homebrews and coming up with new deck ideas. New cards bring, though, are part of that equation. It's getting tools to make something new, and allowing that creative aspect to flow and come up with basically meta changing decks. Now, I think the power scaling of it, and something we're going to talk about, is maybe putting more thought into how these cards or these mechanics are going to influence not only one particular meta or other different types of formats as well. Because I think what does happen is all these innovative ideas are slapped on the table, but there isn't any balancing, or there isn't as much balancing as there should be done around these cards, and trying to figure out, okay, we've come up with 10 really good ideas. Instead of throwing everything out at once and seeing what happens, let's maybe do 3 or 4 that we know are going to work okay, and then wait on the others before we release everything at once.
Yeah, and I feel, I mean,
yeah. Go ahead, Chino. What were you going to say?
No, I kind of feel like that in order they have to adhere to this, what, every 3 months they put out a set, or is it 4? Anyway,
Well,
like
they plan the sets 2 years in advance, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like they have to plan, these rotating sets of every 3 to 4 months. So it's, they're trying to be innovative and keep things fresh and whatnot, and I don't think they just have time to really balance check every single card that they make.
It's hard. So
Yeah.
I want to jump in real quick about this. It's like our agent of treachery that's constantly stealing everything. You also have to think about maybe when they were designing that card and picturing it in standard, they were also testing at a period when things like Veil of Summer was still a legal card in standard, when Agent of Treachery was supposed to be like maybe getting big kind of thing. So it's
Right.
like they have different tools that it's like, all right, standard might look very different when they're designing it too, and then just because they're pushing this innovative level and things are getting so crazy, they have to ban more things. Like the standard that they were designing in R&D and at Wizards and doing the testing ends up looking completely different because they're pushing the envelope so much. So it's like it's this weird conundrum, right, where you're stuck in. It's like, how much should you be pushing the meta when even the stuff that you're testing now is too warped and it's nothing like what it looked like when you were testing it, based on once it gets into the player's hand.
True, but the one thing I'd like to bring up a counterpoint to that is like Oko, because we were just talking about that not too long ago. When Oko was first introduced, that card, I mean, yeah, maybe it didn't get as much playtesting and people didn't realize how much it was going to break the meta as it did, and even all the different formats. But there were a couple of individuals who even admitted, who were playtesting this new set, that talked about how they felt Oko was too overpowered, but they still kind of released it anyways, hoping that the meta would just kind of, hey, this is it's gonna be like a rock that you throw that causes a ripple, but then it's eventually going to stabilize and flatten out, and it didn't. So I think maybe one of the things to do into this point is really emphasize a little bit more of that balance, and kind of think about what is actually going to be accepted and countered by a meta, versus just, hey, this is going to rip the meta apart, we're going to have to actually ban the card. And then you had creativity and innovation, but in order to balance it, you had to hatch it out and get rid of it in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chino, do you want to start moving into where Mark talks about being the innovation guy and kind of that unexplored space and balance and stuff? Because I have to run out real quick, like.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to read as we go
you're
along.
Good. I just figured it's kind of more like the idea about, because he's the one that normally comes up with cards, and he's really like, hey, should we not be pushing the envelope and innovating and going into these unexplored spaces? And I just was wondering what your thoughts are with that while I jump out real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the same sort of in the same vein as what we were, what we're already talking about. But, I mean, because he asked the question, I put companion into Coria. Was I wrong to do? I don't know if I have an opinion on this one yet. So, I mean,
fair enough. So let me ask you this, because I've read a little bit of it on it as well. So I guess the idea behind it, and why it's being rejected so much in terms of this companion mechanic, is because it kind of warps the idea of creating a deck. So it creates innovation in terms of, hey, look, to have this companion, you have to set these rules in place to be able to play the deck. But in reality, it gives you access to extra tools that other people wouldn't have. So, for example, you have Loris, who is probably the most broken card out of a Ikoria or Ikoria, and how it interacts with pretty much it's affecting Modern, it's affecting Pioneer. It's basically almost a must-have in certain decks where you have access to this additional resource. He is very accessible because he only costs 3 mana. You could literally, someone could dumpster your entire hand. You get 3 mana, play him, and then you have access to all the creatures that you've lost. So it really gives you an access to kind of an edge. What's the other one? The swan snake thing or whatever, Yorion.
Mm-hmm.
That's really kind of creating some stir as well, because it's a guaranteed card you have access to that you can literally flash all your permanents on the table. And to honest God, that's like the deck I run most into, and that's why I started playing the deck I did, because all I see is Yorion just flashing, making all the permanents come back.
Well, when it comes down to it with these cards too, is the building restrictions are not that difficult, right? It's like, I mean, my permanents have to be less than 2, but all my spells can be more than 2, so I can support this easily. It's like, I'm gonna just make my deck bigger, so I just put more value in it. Yeah, sure, okay, this seems fine. What? This is not a downside. And that's like, maybe if the companion restriction was more restrictive for standard, it would be better, or more restrictive in general for these companions. Like the idea of, you want to reward somebody with this awesome effect if they can jump through all these hoops. It feels like, I just have to take one step and now my deck is amazing. Like you really don't have to do too much to make the companion stuff work for, in particular, standard. And we're seeing for other formats like Modern, Legacy, Vintage, where it's like, all right, I'll just keep running the most powerful stuff and just slightly tweak my deck to make this work. Like Vintage, things are crazy bonkers, and I don't know if we want to jump ahead to there yet, or if we want to keep talking about this, but just, companions are crazy.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Chino.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think I totally agree with you that there needs to be, I mean, it's cool that you have that, but I feel like they're way too easy to A, build around, and B, play.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no idea how you would ever tweak it to make it so it was harder. I don't know if like you don't have it readily available to play, but you have 2 copies in your deck rather than 4. I don't know, but it just seems like it's way too easy now to just always have it available.
Right, yeah. And it's just like, and that's the thing, it's like, you basically always have 8 cards as your starting hand if you don't mulligan, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's like,
that's the problem I have with it.
I mean, nobody's casting this on turn 1 in standard. They are casting it on turn 1 in Vintage, but it's like these ideas of having it. And, I think it's like you talked about, is like you can sit here and try to play this grindy matchup against Loris or something like that, and they keep killing your creatures, and then, okay, you've wasted all your resources killing everything, so now they just play Loris, and every turn they get to bring a permanent back. So it's like...
Right. It's, to me, and the reason why I have such a problem with companions, in all honesty, is because I see it kind of like a combo deck. So I myself am playing a combo deck right now. If I have the combo, great, I do really well. If I don't have the combo, I'm grinding until I get the combo, or I'm grinding until I win or lose. Most of the time I'm losing, to be honest with you. So with companions, they're part of a combo, and you have the piece of the combo that you need guaranteed. So it's kind of what you had said earlier, where you're basically starting with an 8-card hand, where part of your combo, or part of what makes your deck work, already is in your hand. Yeah. So it takes that whole element of drawing to that, where we'll take Garuda, for example, that broke the first 2 weeks or first week of Ikoria coming out.
Especially best of one.
Right? Yeah, best of ones. It was this creature where literally all you have to do is ramp up to get to him, play him, and then if you get really, really lucky, which most people do, just beat the crap out of someone straight up with copies of it. Mm-hmm. So that itself is innovative and cool, But the fact that you had access to trigger your combo in your starting hand gave you more access to mulligan to different cards. It gave you different planning strategies. It's the exact same concept as the mulligan rule when it changed. How giving that one scry allowed you to fix your hand a little bit better and think about how you were going to play the next couple of turns. This just gives you a combo piece right off the bat. And that's essentially why I have such a big problem with it.
Yeah, I was looking at the companions in general, and it's like, for the most part, all of them have really good effects with them. Right? It's like there's not very many that are just like, I don't really care about this companion. There are a few that exist, right? Like the cat beast or whatever, that's like just gives everybody +1/+1. That's that specific creature type. Or Omori or whatever, Umori the Collector, the ooze that you make each non-land card in your starting deck has to share a type. So like if you're like, oh, my deck's just full of creatures, or my deck is full of artifacts, and those things cost one less, like those don't seem like they're that powerful effects for what you get, right? It's like, all right, these are fine. And if companion was something like that this is just fine, then maybe that's where it needs to be, and that's the power level, right? Like these just like, oh, there's these weird deck constructions and for people that are homebrewing and stuff like that, but it's really not going to be format defining, where it's like they're like, all right, you know what? Companions are going to be a big thing about it. We're doing it. But I feel like by pushing companions, it takes away from the things like mutate, right? Which, how many people here have seen a mutate deck in standard, best of 1 or best of 3, after the first week of the release? Because I haven't seen any since then.
Yeah, same.
Mine. That's about it, honestly.
Right? It's like, and I think mutate is a really cool mechanic, but it doesn't matter in this format. It's either you're playing companions or you're not. And even the decks that aren't playing companions, like you can get by with the cycling deck without having companions, or you can just run it with companions, right? It's like it's not that much of a change to the cycling deck. I don't know. I think companion is a cool idea, but
it is. And I'm going to actually bring up a point that Chino had made, and I'll let him expand on this in the last podcast about Oko. So Oko, this card got printed, and it was a very specific color. It shifted the meta because everybody was essentially splashing a particular color to be able to run Oko, correct? So it feels like with Companion, it could have maybe been a better idea had the companions been better spread out and there were viable companions of every color, because then you're being creative and innovative, but you're also evening the playing field so everyone has access to power cards. So what happens is we have Yorion, we have Laris, and then we have the Walrus, and then Garuda. That's it in terms of companions. I mean, and the Sacrifice color companion.
So Obosh, the odd color, Garuda, even color or even converted mana cost. Those make sense that you'd see play for those.
Yes.
Kyruga, Loris, Euron. I think I've seen some like that Genrith, the giant elk, the Wellspring guy that taps and gives you a bunch of mana. Every now and again I might see that, but not really.
But they're not as powerful. So it's the same thing as where they did an entire set of planeswalkers, and we got a couple really good ones like Teferi, whoopee frickety doo, another power Teferi, but we didn't get powerful planeswalkers all across the board. And I guess my thing would be if you're going to release such a mechanic that is going to change the very fabric of how you play Magic, because it really does.
Yes.
You need to do it across the board so that if you're like, hey, we're going to reset it for everyone, let's give everyone a fighting chance. It almost feels like you're giving a couple people machine guns and then another person like one or two sticks and hoping for the best. It doesn't feel balanced in that regard.
Chino, any other thoughts about Companion before we start hopping into Companion and other formats?
Well, I guess this is sort of a transition, but I think it's very telling that the very first tournament after companions were released, what 80% or some
Yes, something
ridiculously
crazy.
high percent of all decks in those events were companion decks. Even like you said, the legacy and like the
Vintage and modern and all the other,
the
not just
crazy
standard. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's my I guess last 2 cents on that. So I mean, I do think it's I mean it is a cool concept. It's just I don't know. It's me sitting in my armchair, not involved in the production process at all.
Oh yeah,
I
right.
think that it could have been balanced a little better.
Well, so let's talk then about those extended formats, and in particular the bane of extended formats, which is our cat that we keep talking about this whole time, because why not just slightly tweak your deck for this cat nightmare here. So remember, it's cost 3, generic, and then white black. So you can choose, it's hybrid mana, so you could choose double white, double black, or any combination of the two. Companion, each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less, which is very easy when you think about formats like Modern that are trying to win on turn 4. Right? They're playing low to the ground fast things and kind of messing with your opponent any way they can. There are exceptions to this, like low curve, like Tron is like one of those big curve out decks, right? Amulet Titan has the Titan, so you can't really run this in it, but there's pretty much most of the other cards in there are now adjusting their mana base, tweaking themselves so they are running white, running black, or any sort of combination, splashing it in there to make sure they have access to this. Because during each of your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. So all those people that love running things like Mishra's Bauble, which is a 0-cost artifact that lets you look at the top card of yours or your opponent's library, put it back on top, and then during the next upkeep, you get a draw card. You get to cast that from your graveyard for free and just get card advantage. You can get creatures back. You can get enchantments back. You can get anything in this kind of realm of permanents that have a converted mana cost 2 or less. So in Vintage, where you might be playing a deck that runs Power 9, you can get that back. So you could, in theory, on turn 1, play a Black Lotus and any of the other Moxes to go along with it. Let's, Mox Emerald or something, right? Doesn't really matter. And then you play Loris. Sacrifice that Black Lotus, get 3 black or 3 white, cast them, and then you get to recast that Black Lotus from your graveyard. It's like, what? So
I know someone listening right now is one of those guys. We don't like
right?
you.
It's Vintage.
I'm just going to say it right now.
All the Vintage decks are now running Loris. I say all because really it's all of the top decks in kind of the Vintage right now. There are a couple of Vintage decks that are still running around that haven't gone all the way into Loris, I think. I think there's some of the Dredge ones or Eldrazi ones that aren't because they don't need to. They can keep doing it their way, but for the most part, it's still switching into that. Now,
Just haven't figured out how to use it yet.
yeah, right. It's like I've got all these Dredge things that cost 3 or these Eldrazi that cost 4. Do I want to have those or do I want to have Loris? It's like it's a challenge. But Modern, right? It's another thing, is a very much focus on Loris getting added in. There are still decks that aren't on that, like Obosh kind of going all odd all the time. There's a Gruul deck like that's running around in Modern.
And Control, right, with Yorion?
Yep,
Yeah.
and yep. Control is kind of the big thing. But even with that, it's still very much focused on Loris being in there. Like the Control side of things, they're running Euron because it's like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, right? I like the ETB effects off of Snapcaster Mage, right? off of Season's Pyromancer or something like Feldar Guardian, which just kind of give me extra triggers, yes, I think I want to do that. But then you have, right? You're just like, ooh, this sounds gross. What? I don't want to play against this.
No, I want to put that deck together. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's pretty gross with some of the cards that are existing. But so one of the decks that I know you guys love mono red, so we're going to talk a little bit about some red decks for a second. So
I'm
burn.
leaving.
Gotta go.
All right, guys.
You guys remember this burn deck that exists, this like red white Boros burn, and how one of the ways to kind of slow them down and stop them is kill off their creatures and stuff like that, and then they just have to run out of gas with their burn spells. Well, with Luris in there, you get to bring back your Swift Spears and your Goblin Guides that have haste, so it's just like, here's just 2 more damage, right? Here's 1 more damage, right? It's pretty good. Devoted Devastation, right? Which you can get the infinite mana and kill somebody with Walking Ballista, and it's a combo-based deck. You need Vizier of Remedies, you need Devoted Druid as your way to generate infinite mana, because your creatures can't get -1 counters on them, so Devoted Druid says put a -1 counter on it and then untap it. So it's like, all right, I'm going to put a -1. Oh, wait, he doesn't get a -1, so he just untaps. I'm going to do this. Now I have infinite green mana, and you throw it into a bunch of stuff and kill somebody. So now it's like, hey, here's a great way to protect your combo because you got Luris, and you can bring back your combo pieces from your graveyard. And it's format warping. Companions are good. It's basically saying, hey, you're either running Yorion if you're playing Control. If you're not playing Control, you're running Luris. Even Infect is switching over to running Luris. So that should give you an idea. They're going Bant for Luris, saying, hey, this is more important than something like Teferi or the other Bant versions. Just bringing back our creatures is what we want to do. So I don't know. I think Companions are too strong for Magic, personally, if you can't tell from just how I keep talking about it.
Well, I think we're all in the same page. We're all on the same page in terms of they're strong and their effects are really strong, but they're not very hard to build around, or it's not, it's kind of like what I had said earlier. It's not a, hey, I had to go and collect all these stones to make an Infinity Gauntlet. It's like, you get an Infinity Gauntlet, you get an Infinity Gauntlet, you get an Infinity Gauntlet, and they're just handing them out by, whichever store you want to go to. So the thing is yes, I get where this, I think, originally maybe started as a creative mechanic. I think that, again, there was too much, in my personal opinion, there was too much emphasis on creativity, and there was not enough emphasis on balance. And you can see by some of the, comments that we've read through where people are like kind of defending that stance. It's like, well, they should be allowed to be creative and come up with new ideas. And well, if I don't do that, then I have to limit myself to whatever I'm doing. And yes, that's true, but I think there's a right time to introduce certain new ideas as well. And I think that's just goes across the board for everything, and Magic is very similar in where things like this, there's such a power curve, need to be introduced when the meta is ready to accept it. So I guess my point would be, like, how do you guys feel about that? Is there really ever a time to introduce things like this, or is it just seems that as of late, and I think this is the upset with Standard, we just keep getting more and more and more power curves left and right. It just has not stopped, and everything is warping it, and it's you don't even, it feels like the meta doesn't even have a chance to stabilize before you're just kind of throwing a giant boulder in the middle of it and just having the water go everywhere. So that's kind of a little frustrating as well, because it's not like I come from Modern where I'm used to, okay, these are kind of the decks and there's these variants, and you can do well if you stay kind of around these parameters, but it's kind of, it's set. And Standard, it, as of late, it feels like it's a super hyper modern, and then every once in a while it just gets a little bit of legacy thrown in there with some crazy ass cards that just destroy everything that's happening.
Yeah, like, it's strange. I don't know. Chino, what you gonna think What are you gonna say
Yeah,
about
no, I was just gonna say that honestly, I don't know why they felt the need to put them in this set
it? Mm-hmm.
because, like you said, the mutate thing was very innovative and really cool. So why did they also do the companion thing now? So I don't know. It just seems like they could have done all that they wanted to do of be innovative while keeping the power, under control kind of stuff. So I don't know. That's just like I said, I just sort of thought of that while I was listening to you guys talk of just like, well, why did they feel the need to do this even? So, I mean, yeah, it's a cool idea on paper, but like you said, having it in your starting hand and, it being super, super powerful, I don't know. It just seems like if they wanted to do it, just wait and make sure they get it right rather than do it now and get it, fast. But
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a good point, right? It feels like, oh, we love this idea, and it fits with this theme of there's these monsters or whatever that exist that are companion to the humans, and they work together and they help fight other monsters and stuff. But like, cool flavor points, but it's like that, like pushing everything, right? And by pushing this mechanic kind of thing, it's now, I don't know, I guess it's like, would you rather have a bunch, like the whole set be full of dud companions and be like, well, this is a dumb mechanic, why did they even introduce it? Or now we're in that point where it's like, okay, more than half of the companions are really good and you should be running it, and if you're not, then you're playing Magic wrong right now. So it's like, there's got to be a middle ground, I feel like.
yeah,
And maybe it's just like there's not enough time with the development of sets,
yeah,
and
that's what I think it
maybe
is.
we need more time in between sets.
Yes.
So,
Yes, 100%. I would agree with that on so many levels, and I think the thing is that if the idea behind being innovative is to spark creativity in deck making, then you also need to think about how balance is going to affect it. Because if you introduce cards that force the decisions that you make to go a certain way because the curve or power spike forces you to have to be in that area to be able to play, then you're not really, you're almost kind of it's almost counterproductive to what you wanted to do. So hey, we want to be innovative, we introduced a new mechanic, but it's shit on the format and no one else can be creative because of our quote unquote creative idea. So it's almost kind of like I was saying, counterproductive that you have these cards that are introduced to the meta. It shapes everything in the way, and then you're taking your own innovation is taking away from the creativity of others because you're forcing them to have to use that mechanic instead of giving enough of something for everyone else to be able to bring their own spin to it. And if that means doing more um, testing with people outside of the organization or whatever it may be and giving it more time to get some feedback in terms of, hey, this is a really shitty idea, and maybe at the end of the day they're like, hey, well, 90% of the players said that card was probably going to be too strong, maybe we shouldn't release it now. And that's taking the time to really think about the overall health of the game, because at the end of the day, the innovative part of the card creators and the people who are bringing these to the table are just as important as the people who are playing. Because if you bring something in that makes people step away from the game, then what was the point? Just to bring your idea to the table to make other people uncomfortable. So it's I think that's something that I agree 100% in this rant, essentially, that I think it needs to have more time, and I think feedback from a bigger player base needs to be brought in to really be able to get an idea of how these cards could cause or what these cards can really do in terms of the meta they're going to affect.
yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
And sorry, before we move on, just two things that I've again thought about while sitting here listening.
While I was ranting.
It's been a very
No,
ranty
like
podcast, right? It's kind of needed.
no, it's just I think it's interesting and a bit I'm not funny, but I guess more, just interesting that the new set included these two pretty unique mechanics, and one of them completely overshadows the other one. So it's almost like they didn't need the mutate if they were going to do the companions, or vice versa. So, like I said, I think they're just trying to shove too much innovation into one set at a time, like each rotation.
That's a good point. I have a question for you guys, real quick. I'm sorry, Chino. That the explore mechanic, when that was introduced, did that have another mechanic that accompanied that, or I can't actually remember? That's why I'm asking.
It was from Ixalan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me look and see. I don't
remember
all the
because that's a
cards
reinforcement to what Chino is saying, that it seems like in last sets they've only introduced, and I could be wrong, and I'm sorry if I am, but they've only introduced one mechanic, and that was the focus. You're absolutely right. They're doing too much at once, and personally, I like mutate. I think if mutate had just been the thing that was introduced, that would have been cool, and then bring companions in after the rotation happens, because then you don't have all these other crazy ass cards that are breaking due to companions.
Yeah, and the other thought of how to make companions balanced. I just keep remembering the it's in historic now, but the Nicol Bolas, the 4-drop that you can then pay 7 mana and transform it.
The Ravager,
yeah. So it's like even like lore wise, you could say like you play this creature, this cat, this whatever, and you then like quote unquote earn its trust by fulfilling some requirement, and then it becomes your companion, and then it's super powerful, but it gives your opponent a way to respond to it. So, and they could make it unique, like for the Luris, like I don't know, they need to sacrifice two or less man. I don't know. I'm just sort of spitballing here, but it just seems like they could have gone many different ways rather than just, hey, you have it in your starting hand and they're really powerful, and now everyone's going to use them. So
what it actually sounds like to me, Chino, is like you should be working for Wizards.
Right. So the other mechanic from Ixalan, which I'm sure if people are watching or listening at home, they probably already have typed in chat and let us know, but it was the raid mechanic. Whenever you attacked with a creature, something would happen. So, and the raid mechanic was really relevant in draft and limited formats, but when it came to standard, it was not really
it was
relevant.
Cute.
Right, it wasn't really a thing, right? People would either do the explore mechanic or they weren't, didn't really worried about it. The other side of things, though, it's like with that was kind of the two main mechanics, and it was just those two as the main things, and they were, they fit different pieces in the puzzle of what Ixalan was supposed to be. It's like, okay, we have a mechanic that's going to do really well and be a good center point for limited, and we have one that has the potential to be a good center point for kind of constructed and standard and stuff. And I think that's a good way of doing. Oh, technically they had 3 mechanics because they also had enrage because there was dinosaurs. So when
Jesus. All right. Well, my point from earlier is null now.
Sorry.
But even so, the 3 mechanics that were introduced, kind of they didn't. It wasn't. It felt somewhat balanced.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't like every deck was a raid deck or every deck was an explore deck. Mm-hmm. It was, you still had variety, because now it's every deck is a companion deck.
Yes.
I mean, not every single, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's
but
like almost
majority
all
of them, right?
Yeah.
Like 80% of them are. So
yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we've talked companions a lot, and I know we could continue to talk probably for another hour just on companions alone.
The dead horse has been sufficiently beaten.
I feel like it has. So we've got Historic coming up.
It's now puree.
It's now Historic Anthology 3, as they've talked about the cards that are coming out, and Historic will become a permanent fixture of Arena and will no longer go away for the ladder. So you can just ladder Historic if you want, which is what I'm going to be doing.
Oh.
I'm no longer going to be playing any more Standard. I'm only going to be playing Historic on Arena when this gets introduced.
Yes, me too.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. So it's huge news in that regard. They've talked about the new cards coming out for the Historic Anthology 3, and there's about 6 of them that are really good that I want to talk about.
Did I miss this? Because I saw the 2 that you sent.
Yeah, so
did they release?
They
Yeah,
have
they've
officially
done
released all of
them
them. There's a link at the bottom of the page that, if you keep scrolling, that has the cards. Now, there are powerful cards that exist, like Enchantress is in here, which is an enchantment that whenever you play an enchantment spell, draw a card. Like, there's already versions of that exist. So there's going to be some cool enchantment-based strategies that you can do in Historic, but I'm not going to be as focused on like those cards, like the niche cards. I want to talk about just like, here are the 6 most powerful cards that are coming to Historic that you need to be aware of. If that, we can talk more about other cards, but at least let's start with these ones, which
that's an easy one.
I got the first 3, right? I got the first 3 up here. It's got Maze's End, we've got Ratchet Bomb, and Mira's Wake are going to be 3 of these kind of like all-star cards. I think, Maze's End, if you did not play during Dragon's Maze, it was a deck that existed that was a very silly niche deck that was a Turbo Fog deck. And it was all about getting 10 guild gates and winning. And there was already guild gate based decks that existed in that standard for when they re-released, when we returned to Ravnica, and there was guild gate based decks, and there's new tools to play with. So I think Maze's End is going to be a legitimate deck that's going to be running around Historic that people need to be aware of.
I know I'll be playing that deck 100%.
Yes.
I can say Nan actually was the one that introduced me to the idea of that deck actually when it was a thing, and I never got to make it myself. I would just borrow his deck he made, and at first I was completely against it and thought it was kind of like a gimmicky, why would anyone do this? This is so stupid. And then after you play it, it's kind of incredible, honestly.
It's kind of crazy. It's just, yeah.
It is. It's basically Turbo Fog that has a win condition that at first glance you're like, oh, this is really difficult. Will I ever win this way? And believe it or not, you actually won more than you would believe. So I'm really, really excited about this one.
Especially now they have so many different ways of cheating out lands.
Yes.
Like twice, 2 lands in a turn kind of stuff. So
yeah, so that's why it's going to be really cool to put that together. So Mira's Wake is an enchantment, has that nice little anthem effect that buffs up everybody. Everybody gets +1 on your team. And then whenever you tap a land for mana, you get an extra mana that mana would be able to be produced from that land. So 5 cost enchantment, 3 generic, a green, and a white. So for those ramp-based strategies and anthem-based strategies that exist of buffing up your guys, you just got another tool for your toolbox. So, and this ramp-based strategy works really well with one of the other cards that we're going to talk about. That's kind of a little expensive, up in like 10 costs there. But Ratchet Bomb, I think, is going to be MVP inclusion as a removal spell.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's so good because you can kill tokens with it, as well as being able to destroy enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, because you put a charge counter on it for tapping it as an activated ability. You can also tap it, sack it, and destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana costs equal to the number of charge counters on Ratchet Bomb. So,
and it's funny too with Ratchet Bomb. Ratchet Bomb actually started to see a lot of play in Modern as an answer to. I actually can't remember the deck that it was an answer to, honestly, but it grew in popularity and everybody was sideboarding it. I know it was a sideboard card for Tron for sure, and I ran it when I was playing Tron. But yeah, just to elaborate on what Nan had said, it's the versatility that it has to blow up pretty much anything that makes it such a good card, in all honesty.
Well, yeah, because I can't remember the name of the land, but you have that now, but it takes it's XX and then tapping it to put a charge counter on it.
Oh yes. What is it called?
I almost said Blasted Land. Blast Zone.
Blast Zone.
Yes.
That's what it is.
That's it. Yeah. It's like it's like a souped up version of that because you don't need to pay anything for it. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's nice. I mean, you still have to build up a little bit, and it takes some time because you tap it to put the charge counter on it. And so once you've tapped to do that, you can't tap it to sacrifice it in the same turn. So you have to wait a little bit. But if you're playing against a low to the ground deck, all right, by turn 3, I essentially can have a board wipe to kill off these low to the ground fast aggro decks.
Or if you're Nan, you can just play a deck that just taps everything and then untaps everything and then taps it again.
You wanted to do something? Too bad. You're tapped out.
Yeah.
So the other 3 cards, bam, 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 one of these links. There we go. Okay.
Obliterator's on there, right?
Yes. Phyrexian Obliterator, Unburial Rites, and Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. So I feel like Mira's Wake and Ulamog seem like they fit nicely together in a deck. Like, my lands make more mana, and I need to get to 10 mana, so then I can cast this 10/10 indestructible Eldrazi that when he enters the battlefield, no, I'm sorry, when you cast it, it doesn't even have to enter the battlefield. So if you counter it, you still get to do this. When you cast this guy, you get to exile 2 permanents. So this can be planeswalkers, can be lands, this can be creatures, this can be enchantments, this can be artifacts. It doesn't matter. Anything. You can just get rid of them. And if he resolves and comes out onto the battlefield, when he attacks, your opponent has to mill their top 20 cards. So, yes.
So he's a mill card.
He's a mill card. So we need to start building Mira's mill deck. That's what it's going to be.
Gino, I think our last podcast, we're going to have to get the team together and figure this one out.
Unburial Rites is another reanimation spell. There's a couple that exist right now within the collection of MTG Arena, but one of the benefits of this one is when you throw it into your graveyard, it costs less, essentially, right? So the flashback cost to return a creature to the battlefield is only 4 mana, 3 colorless, and a white if it's in your graveyard. On the other side, it normally costs 5 mana, 4 generic, and a black in order to cast. So just more tools to reanimate and play around in your graveyard. For those that want to make reanimation decks, this isn't like kind of a must-have include based on the power level of reanimation spells that exist on Arena. And then finally, my favorite mono black card, Phyrexian Obliterator. For 4 black, you get a 5/5 trample horror that whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source controller sacrifice that many permanents. Now, if I attack Chino with this, and Chino blocks with a 2/2, his 2/2 will die. He'll take 3 damage because of the trample, and then he has to sacrifice his 2 permanents after that. So it's pretty cool. I like doing that. Now, there are cards that exist, like, I think there's a Boros card that's like, target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. If you cast this against somebody that has a Phyrexian Obliterator, the Phyrexian Obliterator will deal 5 damage to itself, and as the owner of the Phyrexian Obliterator, you would then have to sacrifice 5 permanents. So there are ways around this. Don't get all feeling like you're safe with your 5/5s. There are ways to stop you. But really, this is another tool for the mono black deck that exists. Grey Merchant is already on Magic Arena. So now it's just, hey, on turn 4, I can play Phyrexian Obliterator, and on turn 5, I can play Grey Merchant and automatically drain you for 6, assuming I don't have any other creatures out. That seems pretty good. Drain you for 6, swing at you for 5. Oh, he's got trample. Oh, are you going to sacrifice a bunch of stuff? Yeah, I'm excited for making a mono black deck as well for this.
I'm worried people are going to go all in on this guy, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's going to be that one crazy guy that goes like Dimir and just like slaps in dive downs and counter spells, and like the entire idea of the deck is just to get this son of a bitch out and then to never let him die. You're targetable spell, no dive down, Oh, you want to do that counter spell and then just make them sacrifice permanents until they quit. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with him. I really do think people are going to try to get kind of, jiggy with it.
Mm-hmm. Chino,
yeah,
between... Yeah, I was going to say, between all these cards, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I think the just thinking, like you said, at first glance, the Phyrexian card is insane, but we have so many tools that exile, that bounce, that just outright kill cards, that I think we'll have a lot of answers for it.
Yeah, and plus with the historic, we're getting a new removal spell, if you will, because there is an edict effect now. Chainer's Edict, which costs 2, which is just another sacrifice. Target player sacks a creature, which we have some of those type sacrifice effects that already exist on Arena as well. But this one also has a flashback cost. So it costs 7. So it's just like, hey, early on I can make you sack something, and then later in the game I still have a removal spell that I can use for my graveyard. I don't know, the shrines that exist we don't need to talk about because they don't really matter. Most of the other stuff is just like, here's other pieces to play with that kind of fit specific roles, but these 6
Ancient
cards,
Sigurd is pretty good.
Yeah.
I would say Ancient Sigurd is an honorable mention.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely going to see some play.
Yeah, the top row there, like Chroma's Memorial, that's cool. There are some more artifact play things that you can do. I think I'm going to update my blue-white deck and just kind of make it a little bit, make a fast version and then make a slow version, if that makes sense, and throw at least a 1 or 2 of Chroma's Memorial in the slow version. But Body Double is going to exist now. It costs 5. It's enters the battlefield, and it basically becomes a copy of a creature in a graveyard, right? So if you're doing some sort of reanimation strategy, maybe you might see some body doubles running around. I feel like that's one of those cards that can easily turn into some crazy combo-y stuff like this. So just be aware that people might start trying to play with that in the future. I don't think we have enough tools to really break it in Arena or Historic, but just, there's some cool stuff that's coming. Overall, I'm really happy with this. Like, Ancient Ziggurat, it's going to help the human deck out for sure, and other creature-based decks, so I think it's going to be cool to see what people do with these new pieces for Historic, and I'm pretty much only going to start playing Historic now, so.
Yeah, so I have a quick little question for you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chino.
No, just looking at the Enchanter's presence. Because we already have a pretty interesting enchantment decks,
right?
So that's just going to speed those way up.
Just an extra thing. Plus, there's basically that card on a creature too, right? So you can have all the draw effects that exist now for this Enchantress style deck.
Yeah.
So Mike, the question I was going to ask real quick, and maybe that's kind of wrapping up some of the things that we've talked about. What are your thoughts, and I'll preface it that this may be a silly question, but what are your thoughts in terms of how these cards are introduced to the historic format? So obviously there's less of a pool of cards that we have to play with, but then again, someone's going through and figuring these things out, and you made a very good point where you said there's not enough in standard right now for us to break this. So do you think that with these cards are introduced, there's been a little bit more thought put into what they can do and how to balance around them? Because some of these cards by their own right have been high power spikes. They've had things that I wouldn't say broke them. Nobody broke Maze End, but now that there's more things for Maze End is going to be a thing. Trust us, Nan and I will be playing the living shit out of this deck. So I guess it's just to kind of talk a little bit about that.
No, I think that's a good point. It does feel like the cards that they are introducing first into Historic really have a lot of thought going into what they want this format to look like, right? It's like the shrines that they're introducing, like from Kamigawa block, it's like nobody was sitting around going, you know what I really want in Historic and on Arena? I want a 5-cost enchantment that makes a 1/1 spirit. No, nobody's sitting here going, I wish I had those shrines. I don't know. I think it's somebody clearly has an idea in mind of we're going to introduce a mix of old cards from specific sets. Some of them might not be as iconic, but something that would be cool and really help people with brewing, right? That's kind of what it feels like Historic is turning into, is hey, you want to go brew with fun old cards and new cards together in a weird format? Go ahead. right? That's what it feels like. I'm sure we're gonna see Historic turn into a companion zone, though, so just be ready for that.
Oh God, I hope not. I'm quitting if that happens. I'm so tired of seeing
Sorry, we'll
Yorians.
just, we'll
It's
just
not even
play.
funny.
We'll just play Maze End, and you can sit there and have your extra cards and do a bunch of stuff. We're just gonna play Maze End and just prevent you from stealing our lands because we're gonna play Veil of Summer. Is Veil of Summer legal in Historic? I don't remember. I feel like it's banned in
I feel like it got
Standard.
banned. Yeah,
It's like,
the one thing that made everything okay is gone.
Let me see. Is Veil of Summer?
Refresh my memory. Is that the one that makes things immune to a certain color?
Yeah, it gives you protection from whatchamacallit, blue and black, I think.
No, so it's your permanents that you control. Can you and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and black until the end of turn?
That's what it's about.
And if your opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn, you get to draw a card.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the draw card thing.
So it's like, it's got some nice upside.
That was 100% the Kryptonite to Oko, and then because both were introduced, they both kind of broke things by their own rights. They're like, oh yeah, let's just ban one of those. They ban Oko. Oko got banned before Veil of Summer, right? And then it's like, oh no, the Kryptonite needs to be removed as well because people are using it for evil, So it's.
Oh, yeah. I think it's like. I think it's suspended. Is it no longer suspended? Historic. Okay, let's see. Following cards are moved from suspended to banned. Oh no, they're officially banned. They got officially banned. But yeah, so Oko, Once Upon a Time, and Veil of Summer are all banned. Now, Field of the Dead though got unbanned in Historic.
Ooh,
that was a nasty surprise.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So we can make a nice.
You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking
the Dead.
Maze End, Field of the Dead, dude.
That's what I was thinking. So.
Oh.
All right, so we've been doing this. This was a longer episode this time around. So before we get sucked into a whole another discussion about Maze End, because I'm sure we'll talk about it in the next podcast after Historic comes out and how we've been playing with things. Why don't we just kind of go around, final thoughts on things or any thoughts going forward about Magic before we sign off for tonight? Gina, why don't we start with you?
No, I guess I wish they going forward would not try to force too much stuff into each release, because I mean, me personally, I would have been perfectly happy with just the mutate mechanic. So I just, like I said, I really enjoy the new set and I'm having a ton of fun playing, but I just wish that they would not maybe sprinkle things out more evenly rather than trying to pack as much as they can into each release. So
good thoughts. Jaime, any other thoughts about everything?
Yeah, my closing thought would be kind of right along what Chino is saying. I would like them to take a little bit more time with just maybe doing a little bit more analysis in terms of looking at the history of cards. So the last couple of sets that they've released, they've had to do heavy banning. They've had to do a lot of different things just to stabilize the format. And it kind of took the first couple of weeks of that roller coaster, kind of made things not fun and people walked away. I would really, again, like them to invest a little bit more time in thinking it through and doing a little bit more analysis than just throwing something out and hoping that it works or it doesn't, and really kind of going with their instincts. I mean, I'll go back to what I had said originally. A lot of playtesters that were playing Oko said, "Oh, we feel like this card is a little too strong, and once people figure out how to use it, it's gonna break a couple things." And I think they just need to focus in on that, think about that, and if a card feels like that, maybe put it on the back burner and move on to another idea and see how they interact with one another before just kind of throwing everything in a pile and hoping to God that it works.
Hoping for the best. Yeah,
hoping for the best. Good old Hail Mary.
All right. Well, good stuff. I'm sure you guys have been feeling your own worries with Magic, or maybe you're loving it. I know when this set first came out, I really enjoyed it and thought, hey, things are looking good for Magic right now, and I'm having a lot of fun. And now as people have figured it out, maybe it was just that initial brewing phase where people are trying to figure things out that I had the most fun. And now that everyone's kind of figured out, okay, what's the broken cards, what aren't. I'm having less fun with it. Then again, maybe once Historic comes out, I'll have more fun again. Who knows? We'll see. I think Wizards, you're going to do what you're going to do. It'd be cool if you balance things more. That seems to be kind of our general census for it. I like innovative stuff, but it's hard, right? You got to figure out a good balance for it. But this is probably not going to be the last time that we're going to have this discussion, because Wizards is going to continue to make Magic, and we're going to keep playing Magic. So we'll let you guys know as things keep progressing about what's going on in the Magic scene as we jump into more podcasts in the future. So thanks for tuning in and watching, guys, and we'll see you guys next time.